Years ago, I sort of got a little bit lost miles away from my truck in a rather large wilderness area. This was wilderness filled with lions and tigers and bears. Well, there weren't any lions or tigers, but there were definitely bears and probably bobcats. I was using a few different trails to hopefully make a loop back to the parking lot. I knew that I needed to make a left turn soon, but I wasn't sure if the trail I was currently looking at was the left turn I needed to make. If I missed my turn, I would just be headed for miles deeper into the wilderness. It was too late to turn around and still make it back the way I came without hiking for miles in the woods after dark. Without a doubt, I wanted to make it back to my truck. I still had the energy to hike the distance I needed to go. However, none of that mattered if I wasn't headed in the right direction. In fact, it was possible that I could be wasting my energy and getting farther away from where I wanted to be. Matthew chapter 22, verse 35 to 40 says, "Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, 'Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?' Jesus said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.'" We often use the word love to mean that we like something very much. Because of this common use of the word, I think it can be easy to look at the first and great commandment and conclude that it means to love God very much. It can seem like the heart, soul, and mind are just there for emphasis. However, when we use the word love to mean like very much, we're talking about a feeling. A powerful feeling, but a feeling nonetheless. God gives us every reason in the world to have positive feelings toward Him. Does it seem right that Jesus would say that the greatest commandment in the law is to have a certain feeling? Is it possible that we may be missing some of what Jesus was communicating if we accept that the most important command boils down to feeling a certain way? We also know that we use the word love in other ways. We might say that we love our favorite food, but know that we love our family in a very different way. You may even be aware that the Bible translates more than one word as love. However, you don't need to read Greek or Hebrew to suspect that the word love in the Great Command might mean more than just liking or loving God intensely. 1 John chapter 5, verse 3 says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome." Exchanging what we learn about the love of God into the great command gives us something to the effect of the greatest command is to keep the commandments, which is sort of a circular statement. However, maybe the heart, soul, and mind parts are referring to specific ideas rather than just to emphasize how much we love God. Could heart refer to a desire to keep the commandments of God? Could soul refer to how much effort or drive we put into following those commandments? Could mind refer to channeling that energy into a correct interpretation of God's Word or the correct direction? If we put those ideas together, we could think of a desire to drive in the right direction, which gives us three words that begin with the letter D as a memory device. I'd like to look in the book of James with these three ideas in mind. James is one of my favorite books in the Bible because it is a little easier to understand than some of the other books. However, easy to understand does not necessarily mean easy to apply. James was a brother of Jesus. He was a son of Mary and Joseph, so James is often referred to as a half-brother of Jesus. Can we find echoes of the greatest command of loving God with all our heart, soul, and mind in the book of James? I think the first step to loving God and keeping His commands is having the desire in your heart to do what's right. I know that I really wanted to get back to my truck safely when I was lost in the woods. Of course, wanting to do the right thing isn't enough. We have to make the effort and actually know what the right thing is in any given situation. However, the desire to do good is the first step, and it isn't always as easy as it might seem. Although our desire to do good may always be there, it isn't alone, and there are other desires that are competing for our hearts. James chapter 1, verse 14 through 15 says, "But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death." If we examine the desires of our heart, we can see what is competing with the desire to keep God's commandments. What entices us away from the right path? Do we always struggle with the same desires, or do they change over time in different circumstances? When an evil desire conflicts with the desire to do what is right, how do you make that decision? Is it willpower? Is it simply whichever emotion is stronger at the time? Or is it a commitment that we make? Identifying the different directions our hearts are pulling us is the first step to deciding that we want to follow the commandments, but how do we fully commit to that righteous desire? Can it help to imagine where that conflicting desire would take us? What would the outcome of making the wrong choice be? Would it actually make us happy? James chapter 4, verse 1 through 5 says, "Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain, you fight and war. Yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss that you may spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." If we made the wrong choice just this once, would we be satisfied? Would we need to keep making bad decisions until we are finally satisfied? Would we ever be satisfied? What would the final destination of bad choices actually be? How low could we possibly go? Would the consequences others have experienced by making bad choices actually reach you? If the wrong choices wouldn't actually bring happiness, but at best temporary pleasure, what would the alternative bring? What about making the right choice? What would we be missing out on by not choosing the right direction? What is the final outcome of making the right choice? James chapter 4, verse 7 through 10 says, "Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up." Although the right choice may not be the most comfortable in the short term, it will be so much better in the long term. Jesus said we should store up treasure in heaven. Are those types of treasure more important than the temporary riches and treasures in this life? James chapter 5, verses 1 through 3 says, "Come now, ye rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days." If we decide that heaven is more important than earthly riches, if we decide that temporary pleasures aren't worth the consequences, if we realize that following the commandments of God will bring us infinitely more joy than all the treasures and experiences in the world, then we may be able to love God with all our hearts by always desiring to do the right thing. It may be a constant battle, but I believe that it is the beginning of following the greatest command. I could have just stopped when I was lost in the woods, and in a lot of cases that's what you should do, but in that case no one would have been coming to look for me for a while, so I needed to put my effort into finding my way back. Now, what if loving God with all our soul refers to how much effort or drive we put into our desire to do the right thing? Consider that everything that is good in our lives and our very lives themselves have been given to us by God. James chapter 1 verses 16 and 17 say, "Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning." Although we should want to do right and drive in that direction because of our gratitude to God, does it really matter? Is faith in liking God intensely enough? If that's what you want to hear, there are plenty of people in the world who will tell you that. James chapter 2 verses 19 and 20 say, "You believe that there is one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead?" I'm not sure about you, but I hope to be in a better category than the demons on Judgment Day. I am not in any way saying that my good deeds or lack of sin will get me into heaven. Far from it. Only the blood of Christ can save me. However, I also think that it would be dishonest of me to claim to love God if I'm not making a sincere effort to do what He commands. Do I believe that God exists? Wouldn't that fact that He is God imply that He is correct about how we ought to live? Does proclaiming my love for God come across a little hollow if I continue to live my life however I want without regarding what the Bible says? Would you be excited about moving a giant pile of rocks if you knew that the rocks you moved would immediately need to be moved right back to where they started? Motivation often comes from the anticipation of an outcome, but what if you knew that there would be no outcome? How much effort would you put into something that you knew would have no outcome? However, people do this every day. They put tremendous effort into rewards they will never see. James chapter 4, verse 13 through 16, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. We can store treasure in heaven. We don't have to labor in vain. We can work towards eternity. I might be oversimplifying a bit, but it seems we have three choices. Don't work for anything, work for things that rust and perish, or work for a home with God in eternity. We typically think of sin as doing bad things, but James lets us know that sometimes we can sin without lifting a finger. In fact, you might say that we're sinning by not lifting a finger. Trying to find the line where inaction becomes sin is at least another conversation altogether, and quite frankly might be more of a personal reflection for each individual. However, for this conversation, I think it's enough to consider that if we're not putting effort towards doing the right thing, that lack of effort itself can be considered sin. James chapter 4, verse 17, therefore to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Like I said earlier, if I missed my left turn, I would have been traveling further into the wilderness and farther away from my truck. In a similar sense, you can put all your effort into trying to do the right thing, but does that effort matter if you're wrong about what the right choice actually is? Loving God with all our mind might mean that we have a love for the truth and that we look for right answers rather than the easy answers. James chapter 1, verse 5 through 8, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Although we just read that God gives wisdom to all liberally, is it honest in our parts to only pray for wisdom when we have the entire Bible we can study? The book of Proverbs is right there for our study. The sermons, parables, and life of Jesus are laid out before us. The letters of Paul and other apostles all contain wisdom. In addition to answering our prayers for wisdom, we've already received these sources of wisdom from God. James chapter 1, verse 22 through 25 says, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror, and he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. The best way to remember wisdom that you have gained is by putting it into practice. Other than providing us with comfort that may or may not be genuine, putting wisdom into practice is the only way that it actually does any good for anyone. Failing to put wisdom into practice is probably a sign that you don't actually have any wisdom. James chapter 2, verse 14 through 18, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warm and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. It's entirely possible to do the right thing, put all your effort into the right thing, but still fail because you do not know the truth about what is actually right. I don't have any authority to declare what is right beyond what is written in the Bible. Each of us is responsible for determining what course to take for our lives. Easy answers aren't always correct, and we'll all have to face judgment. Although the blood of Christ can cover our sins, I don't think we can point to other people to blame them if we didn't discover the truth. We all have the Bible, and I think that trusting others to read it for us is dangerous. Although you have to determine the right course for your life based on your own understanding of God's words, James offers some clues that can help you determine if you're acting in wisdom. James chapter 3, verse 13 through 17 says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe God doesn't care whether or not we desire to do the right thing. Maybe He just wants us to love Him very intensely. Maybe He doesn't care if we put any effort into doing what's right as long as we tell everyone how much we love Him. Maybe He doesn't even care if we know the difference between right and wrong as long as we have good intentions. Even if that's the case, isn't it better for us to follow God's advice? Even outside of the help we could give others, wouldn't following God's guidance be what's best for us personally? Even if you don't think it has anything to do with your entrance into heaven, shouldn't we want to figure out how to follow God's will for our lives? If we really love God, even if we think that only means that we like Him very intensely, shouldn't we desire to drive in the right direction? 1 John chapter 2, verse 4 says, "He who says, 'I know Him,' and does not keep His commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him." Mark chapter 12, verse 29 through 31, Jesus answered him, "The first of all the commandments is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second, like it, is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these.'" I believe that if we're putting all our heart, soul, and mind into loving God by keeping His commandments, I believe that we're likely putting all of our strength into it as well. So you're probably wondering if I made it out of the wilderness when I was lost. No, unfortunately, I was never seen or heard from again. Actually, I went a little further down the potential left turn, but I figured out that it wasn't the trail I was looking for. Further down the main trail, I found the turn I was looking for, and it was clearly marked with a sign. Maybe you've been headed in the wrong direction. As long as you're still on the trail and the sun hasn't gone down on you yet, you can always turn around and find the right path.